An nakalotak pakalakavsi. Uvangan nakayak, tinitun sinaga Dr. Pearl Kion Brower. Paluk Harry Brower Sr., Paluk Annie Hobson Brower, Paluk Clinton Peltier, Paluk Dobie Malcolm Peltier. Apaka Price Brower, Akara Lillian Peltier Brower Arnold, Apaka Bruce Arnold. Wiga Jesse Darling, Paniga Ilalu Sindrilu. Ukpeaġvik miurunga, Kawalirunga Uvanga Ukpeaġvik Iñupiat Corporation Gum. Kovesuktunga Mangi Chumingamara Uvalupak. So good day to you all and welcome. My Iñupiat name is Nagayak, but my English name, Tunnik name is Dr. Pearl Kion Brower. My grandparents are the late Harry Brower Sr. and Annie Hobson Brower, and the late Clinton Peltier and Dobie Malcolm Peltier. My parents are Price Brower, Lillian Arnold, and Bruce Arnold. My husband is Jesse Darling, and we have two daughters, Iḻa and Sindri. I am from the community of Ukpeaġvik, sometimes also known as Ukpeaġvik, or known as Barrow, the most northern community in the United States. And the indigenous people of that place are Iñupiat, and I am Iñupiat. So I am the president and CEO of Ukpeaġvik Iñupiat Corporation, one of Alaska's Alaska Native Village corporations. And prior to this, I worked for the University of Alaska, focusing efforts on Alaska Native success, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And prior to that, I was at Iḻisaġvik College, Alaska's only tribal college, for 13 years, 8 of which I served as president. So I said in my introduction, I'm very happy to be here today and to welcome you to our conversation about Indigenous student success in higher education. We are going to be taking a deeper dive into what it means to be successful as an Alaska Native student or an Indigenous student in higher education today. And I am so very excited to have 3 amazing panelists with us today. 3 people who I call friends and who are going to just provide so much, a wealth of information to us as we discuss this topic. Before I introduce the panelists, though, I want to take a few minutes to tell each of you a little bit about Alaska and its relationship with Alaska Native peoples. So first off, when we're speaking about the indigenous people of this place, of Alaska, we call ourselves Alaska Native peoples. So I want to note this isn't to be confused with a Native Alaskan. So a Native Alaskan is anyone who was born in this state, but Alaska Native peoples are those who have an indigenous tie to this place that is now called Alaska. For us, in our many generations, this place wasn't always called Alaska. It wasn't always a state. We're actually one of the newest states. And we are one of the states that has had the least amount, the least amount of contact when we're thinking about in years with non-Native individuals. In the state of Alaska, there are 228 recognized Alaska Native tribes. And we have a really interesting relationship with the federal government. In 1971, the Alaska Native Claims Act, what we refer to as ANCSA, was passed by the federal government. So this claim transferred about 45 million acres of land and just under $1 billion and created what we call our regional corporations and village corporations. This amount may sound huge. However, Alaska is the biggest state in the nation. And so this land transference and funding went to create these organizations that are operated today as true corporate businesses. So this is a really unique relationship that Alaska Native peoples have. And so we have had a very different experience than Native Americans in the lower 48 states. So this is really going to be an interesting conversation. However, even though we are unique, I just want to note that as we're kind of looking at a case study in Alaskan education, Alaskan higher education, and even more specific kind of that Indigenous or Alaska Native space in higher education, what we are going to talk about can most certainly be translated to the needs of our Indigenous students everywhere and anywhere. So at your institutions of higher education and beyond. So with that, I'd like to turn our conversation to our panelists, and I'm going to let each of them introduce themselves. They're going to talk about their name, where their organization, a bit of their background and how they come to this place to have this conversation with us today. And then I'm asking each of them to talk about the two kind of chief barriers to success that Indigenous students face in a higher education setting. So with that, I'm going to start with Cal Bacon. And Cal is the Alaska Native and Indigenous Rural Outreach Coordinator at the University of Alaska Anchorage. So Cal, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Pearl, for that wonderful introduction. And thank you for having me. I feel incredibly honored and humbled to be here with you fine folks. So, yeah, my name's Cal and my pronouns are he, him, his. I am an Ahtna, Athabaskan, and Iñupiat. And yeah, as Pearl said, I work for University of Alaska Anchorage on Dena'ina land. That's where I live and play. My picture is from Rabbit Lake. I don't have a UAA background. I should get one. So I'm just using this pretty picture there. But yeah, I work for the Department of Residence Life, where I support Alaska Native students who are living on campus while they're pursuing their higher education. So I definitely get a lot of students that, you know, come from different backgrounds all across the state. For whatever reason, they've decided that they want to, you know, pursue a different life. You know, maybe they just feel like village life isn't for them, or they want to gain some knowledgeable skills and resources that they can bring back to their home communities. So, but it's hard for a lot of folks who grew up in the city to really understand the differences of resources out in the village or across the state versus in the urban areas like Anchorage. So not having access to quality high-speed internet, that's a huge barrier. So that education that they've had before they come here is a vast difference. And also even things of such as signing up for everything that they need to do, such as their classes and, you know, doing their applications that we need to get them into housing. So a few times we have students that just show up with really nothing prepared, no real plan. And so that's a lot to have to navigate for anyone, but especially for someone who is brand new to Anchorage, has maybe never been here before. So I definitely would say just that huge shift from rural to urban life is one of the major barriers. But I think also that kind of ties into like the culture clash, which can then lead to microaggressions and you know, discrimination and racism from their peers, or unfortunately maybe even staff or faculty, you know, who are having this culture shift and not realizing where this person's coming from, you know, where they're at and what challenges they face, and that, okay, they might need a little extra support, you know, but I think then that can lead to other people, you know, just making assumptions about them or undervaluing them. So, and I think that's just true for for all people of color, unfortunately, who are in higher education and who don't have those same resources or same culture as the norm. So as the dominant identity. So yeah, that's what I would say would be the two major challenges.
Great, thank you so much, Cal. Your comments about the preparedness make me remember the many years I had the chance to be a part of our student success team at Iḻisaġvik, and the fact that we had students who would show up to college without even a bag, without toiletries, without a towel, without anything, without clothes, really. And just that idea that, you know, these students, they had no sense of, you know, what they needed to be prepared to go to college. And so that makes me think a lot about that. So I really appreciate that. We will transition JUSTINA WILHELM, president of Iḻisaġvik College.
Goeienacht, Dr. Brower. Haglagifsi, Ubanga JUSTINA, Iñupiat Siniga Abu, Ukpeaġvik Nurima, Sabaktunga, Iḻisaġvik. I said greetings. My name is Justina and my Iñupiat name is Abu. And I come from Ukpeaġvik, also formerly known as Barrow. And I work at Iḻisaġvik College. I have the great opportunity to serve as president of Iḻisaġvik College. I've been with the college for 5 years, and in October will be 2 years serving in the president capacity. Iḻisaġvik College is located in the northernmost community of the US, and we are Alaska's only tribal controlled community college. We are accredited through the Northwest Commission of Colleges and Universities, and we are chartered by our home rule government, the North Slope Borough, and we were created to serve our residents and communities. We are a public nonprofit community college, and our Alaska Native American student enrollment is at 64%. A little bit about my background is I've lived in Ukpeaġvik for over 30 years. My family culture comes from, my mother is Filipino and my father is Italian. I'm a first generation college student, and I did my undergrad and received my sociology degree and my master's in social work. I do come from an administrative background with our local government, nonprofits, with our behavioral health background. I have the great opportunity to be married into the Iñupiat community. I've been married for 15 years. My husband is part Iñupiat and part white. And together we have 4 children and 2 grandchildren. And our family is very connected to our subsistence lifestyle. We're preparing for the fall whaling. My husband is a whaling captain, and we're blessed to be able to harvest and share the gift of the bullhead whale to our community. And as we're approaching our fall whaling season, it's very exciting, and you could feel it across our community. A couple questions that I see are chief barriers to success with Indigenous students is I think of our rural uniqueness. Iḻisaġvik is located in Barrow. We are off the road system. You have to fly here to live in our community. In our North Slope region, our 8 villages, we are not connected by the road system. It is by plane, similar to a lot of places throughout of Alaska where we have the barriers of being connected by road, by plane, by water. So as Cal shared, the technology and broadband support is a barrier for us. There's definitely inequities when it comes to our residents and our students having the ability to connect and receive distance delivery programming and support. So that is one area. You also add on housing issues where there's a high need for housing, and oftentimes multiple family generations are living in one household. So to have that space and that ability to be able to log into a class and not be interrupted and pursue your higher education, that is a barrier that we often hear from our students. Another area to think about is our first generation college students. Oftentimes the majority of our students are first year students, first generation college students, and there's a very close history of the Native American, Alaska Native boarding school era. For example, my husband's mother attended boarding school. So what comes with boarding school is they were taken away from their homes, they had loss of language, culture, values, and traditions to learn the traditional Western education, which is something that was learned and required, and our Alaska Native American people had to set aside their own culture and relearn unfamiliar systems. And unfortunately, that came with a lot of trauma as well. So when we speak today with higher education and encouraging our people to, hey, come go to college, come pursue your higher education, it's very closely connected to relearning our families feeling supportive for our individuals to leave and go pursue their higher education. And one positive with Iḻisaġvik College is we're here in our communities. We're able to allow our residents to attend college either here in the community or via distance, wherever they may live, so that they can remain connected to their important heritage. When you talk with families and encourage higher education, they see it from a community person, a holistic view, and that's really important with our Alaska Native higher education values to stay connected. And as tribal colleges, it's the identity is the core of every TCU, which is the advantage for Iḻisaġvik, that we value the core of family and identity. I'll stop there.
Great, thank you, Justina. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Charlene Stern, Vice Chancellor for Rural, Community, and Native Education at the University of Alaska Fairbanks.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to participate today. So, Charlene Stern oji shiahan nai vashrek o gwatsan Iļi Ukpeaġvik. So I said that my name is Charlene Stern. My family is originally from Arctic Village, and I currently work at UAF, and I am joining the group today from the lands of the Chinahutani of interior Alaska. So what I wanted to share a little bit in terms of my background is that my family's had a really sordid kind of experience with higher education. My father is non-native and actually a graduate of the University of California, Berkeley. My mother, on the other hand, is Gwich'in Athabascan and was born and raised out in the country in the lands around Arctic Village. And like most of rural Alaska, we, until the 70s, did not have local schools beyond an 8th grade education. And so, like Justina mentioned, my mother was among those that were sent away to boarding schools, which really had, profound impacts on our people's experiences with education as a whole that we're still navigating today. So it's interesting, in terms of my background, I'm a product of both of those very different experiences and have myself spent 13 and a half years in higher education pursuing three degrees, and I now work as a higher education administrator. So when I think about the two questions, or the question that you posed about the two chief barriers to Indigenous students' success in higher education, I think the first that comes to mind is that, Western education systems have this tendency to pathologize our students. Our students are often stereotyped or generalized as being underprepared or underachieving. They are at risk due to, lack of preparation, family inexperience with college. I mean, you name it. There's any number of kind of generalizations about why our students aren't prepared in the first place to come to college and why they're not, persisting or retaining or graduating at a level of parity with other groups. And I think when people operate from that limited understanding, they really run the risk of over-focusing on very short-term Band-Aid approaches and interventions versus actually acknowledging that it's not our students' fault that our systems of higher education were never designed by and for our students in mind. So it's no wonder that we don't automatically thrive in those spaces. I think that's a really important ground truthing to as educators and administrators to think about, that where are we placing the burden on students or systems to change in order to change outcome, I think is really critical. I think the other issue is that many Indigenous students still today have to sort of negotiate away a part of themselves or their identities in order to successfully navigate higher education. I think for many of our students, when they decide to attend college, they enter a world where English is the primary and often the only language of instruction. Their syllabuses are all in English, their textbooks are all in English and often written from a Western worldview. Many of our students here in Alaska, they have ready access to their traditional foods at home. When they come to campuses, they're eating at the diner, they're not eating their traditional foods, which is important. They often lose opportunities to be immersed directly in their cultures, in their languages, and their ways of life that are very much tied to their homelands. And so I think distance education opportunities are really important. I think we can, as institutional leaders, try to create a sense of belonging that can help with some of those issues. And I know, here at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, we have a motto that says "You belong here," and we use that a lot. But I think, you know, it's only a motto if our students can't see, feel, and believe it. We have to do our part to ensure that this place reflects them and their communities and their cultures. And so we've been really focused on increasing visibility of Indigenous signage and messaging. You know, we want to be a leader in renormalizing the everyday use of our languages in places that you historically wouldn't find them, which is on college campuses. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Charlene. So wonderful introductions. Thank you for each of you for bringing those barriers to the forefront. Of course, we're going to dive deeper with a few more questions in regards to this area. One of the things I wanted to know is moving forward. We're going to be a little informal. We're going to call each other by our first names, mostly because we all know each other and we are informal. We are friends, but that does not negate the incredible qualifications that each of you bring to this table. And I'm so excited to be able to have this conversation with you. So our first, I guess we've had a question, so maybe it's our second, but as we enter into this space, each of you are an advocate, an administrator, a Native educator in certain senses. So what do you know to be true about Indigenous success in higher education? So that's the question that we're thinking about, you know, and as a part of that, I think even the thought process about kind of redefining what success even means. But what do we truly know to be true in this space that we all have had to journey through in our personal experiences, but also in the work that we've done. So I think we'll go Justina, Charlene, and then Cal in the order. So Justina, if you want to start us off.
Thank you. So what I think to be true about Indigenous success in higher education is taking the importance to look at the person as a whole. And by utilizing a holistic view of our students, their family supports, their community supports, there's so many circles that support our student. We don't look at our student as just one individual person. And as a tribal college, we look to strengthening our community as a whole by providing quality higher education through, if it's short-term trainings or academic semester-long trainings. It's not just the focus on the student success, but looking deeper into how does the success of the student build to create a healthy, thriving community. What I know to be true is we are a small institution that allows us to be flexible with our students' needs, and we could swiftly adjust to some of those needs that have been discussed today, just from the basic needs of I need a toothbrush, or I need some basic needs to make sure that I'm okay, or little reminders, or let's sit with you, or let me walk you down the hall to make sure you get what you need. So building those connections and getting to know our students and their strengths, and to meet our students where they are. We work closely with our community partners and stay connected. And we have our list of local Iñupiat values, but those values are pretty general and can serve in any capacity. And I think amongst all of us, even in this room, we all relate to those when it comes to just to give a couple of our values of respect for nature, sharing, knowledge of language, cooperation, family and kinship, and love and respect for our elders. Just having an elder in the hall. We talked this week. We started the semester where we're feeling that homesickness with our students, and we're thinking, what could we do? Well, let's get Auntie so-and-so to come here and just be here, and maybe she could cook some soup and just kind of sit at the table to be with our students this week to help them. So those little pieces help support our students to create that feeling of fullness and safety that they could continue to provide. This fall, we initiated something which is called Students First, and I'll be talking about it a little later, but really challenging our employees and everyone to commit to putting students first. What are we doing to make sure that we're there for our students? And as tribal colleges and universities provide many services to help students stay in school and complete their studies. Little things like loaner laptops. Do you have the tutoring? What wellness programs, childcare supports, transportation? So all those little supports really tie to the larger picture of Indigenous success for our higher education.
Great, thank you, Justina. Charlene.
All right, well, I think a couple things. One, what I know to be true about Indigenous success in higher education is that many of our students often come to college for more than just themselves. It's not about just increasing their economic mobility. It's not just about gaining a degree for the sake of it. You know, they come to improve their quality of life, not just for themselves, but for their families and their communities. Many of them are first generation students. And so, you know, they carry a lot of responsibility and also in some ways, the burden of having to navigate a very different experience, a new trail that many in their families and communities haven't necessarily navigated successfly in the past. And they know that others, you know, are looking at them and hoping that they can be successful. I also know that many of our students, when they arrive on campus or when they take their first distance course, that they start a very long and often uphill journey, traversing a system that was not designed for their success in mind. I also know to be true that a key factor in Indigenous student success is the success of Indigenous faculty and staff, because representation absolutely matters. I know for myself, I did not experience having an Indigenous instructor in the classroom until my freshman year of college. And I can tell you from that first initial encounter, that really changed the trajectory of my life. And so I think about, you know, what if we were in a world where more of our students encountered that representation earlier and earlier on in their education system. And then lastly, what I know to be true is that our Indigenous students are some of the most brilliant and resilient students that there are. But I also think that, you know, we can sometimes over celebrate resiliency as being a good quality, and that can inadvertently mask the inequities, right? That resiliency is built around. We often celebrate resiliency of our students without asking the much deeper question of why is it that within our systems, our higher education institutions, some students don't encounter as much adversity than others. And to me, that's a really powerful question for us to think about. Thank you.
Thanks, Charlene. So that'll be part 2 of our podcast and webinar is all about resiliency. We could talk many hours about that. And the fact that why do we as Indigenous peoples continuously have to be so resilient? So I think that's a really good topic to be thoughtful of as everyone thinks about Indigenous student success across our nations. Thanks, Charlene. Cal, we'll go to you.
Thanks. Yeah, I really appreciate what both Justina and Charlene said. I also had a similar experience where my first Indigenous educator was in my freshman year of college, and yeah, same thing. It's just completely transformative having that mentor relationship, and so that's my answer is that success it's not one answer, whereas some educators may say, oh, pass or fail or graduate or not as success, but no, that's not, I don't think that's the way we should be looking at success. That's not an Indigenous way of looking at success. Like, the relationships we build along the way. So if students come and they make some great friends or have a mentor, but then something happens in their family or home life and they need to go back, that's not a failure. That's just a part of life. That's just one step in their life. But it's what did they gain from the experience? And maybe down the road when they're ready, they're going to come back and continue towards what they were previously working on. So yeah, I just really think it'd be great if success could be reframed from what it currently is and is to something more Indigenous.
Great. Thank you so much, Cal. I couldn't agree more. So we know that we need to rethink success. We know that there are some real kind of tenements to what we believe and what we know are true about Indigenous students and our systems that they are traversing. As a part of that, then each of your organizations or kind of your departments, you are tasked in some way with being, with trying to create change in your organization so that students, Indigenous students, Alaska Native students really do have the opportunity for more success. As a part of that, the question would be to share with those who are listening, what has, what is one or two things, or maybe three if you've been super successful, but what has your organization implemented that you have actually seen true kind of transformative change around? And with that, Charlene, we'll start with you, we'll go to Cal, and then we'll go to Justina.
So I think, this is the key question, right? What does success look like when we have some opportunity to define it for ourselves and not just rely on kind of the benchmarks and the metrics that are often used in higher education? And I think for me, how I really was able to reframe this in my own mind was really based on the words of the Reverend Dr. Anna Frank of Minto, which is a small community here in interior Alaska. And she talks about higher education as a journey. And our students come to the riverbank, and many of our villages are located along rivers, with different levels of preparation. Some have canoes, some have paddles, some have rubber boots, and others don't. So everybody's coming to that riverbank with a different set of experiences and a different set of skills and a different set of supplies and equipment. And so for many of them, when they start to embark on that journey, it's really going into the unknown. That river is not well known to them. And so, for us as those that work within the institution, we know that river. Many of us have traversed it ourselves. We know where the challenging points are. We know where, it kind of calms down. And our job is to really help them to navigate that river successfully. And I think, for most higher education institutions, we really celebrate the graduation, right? The achievement of a degree completion. And I think that's really important. But for Indigenous students, it's so much more than that. At the University of Alaska Fairbanks, when our students graduate, they wear red sashes at commencement. And it's such a point of pride because they can look around in the sea of graduates and they can recognize, one another and celebrate that collective success. And they know that that person has gone through very similar things probably than I have. And their communities are cheering them on. Their elders are proud of them graduating. And so it's much more of a collective experience than it is an individual one. But I often think about, what does success mean when those students, walk out that door of commencement? How are they putting their education to work for their families and their communities? And to me, that's where success lives. For me, when I graduated with my PhD, my tribe put my degree to work for them right away. The month that I finished, they put that degree to work. And that was success for me. Success for me was also being told recently by a young man from my community that he has a lot of respect for me because I'm one of the very few tribal members that went out, got my education, and still comes back just about every month. Even though I don't live and work in my community, I make sure that those relationships are strong and I prioritize it. So I think, success means all of those things and more for our Indigenous students. In terms of what our organization is doing to implement some changes, is that where you want me to respond next? Yes.
Yeah, Charlene, that'd be great.
Okay, so here at the University of Alaska, and Fairbanks in particular, we have had a strategic goal. We have 6 strategic goals that guide the focus of the university. And our second strategic goal since 2019 has been to strengthen our position as a global leader in Alaska Native and Indigenous studies. And once a goal gets articulated like that, it really helps to create a framework and a pathway to prioritize that as not just the work of the Indigenous people within the institution, but all of us together, that is a shared responsibility. And then in 2021, our Board of Regents, which govern all of the universities associated with the University of Alaska, passed an Alaska Native Success Initiative. And that there again provided a framework for us as an institution and those within the institution to be able to say, this is of utmost importance. And this is, some of our goals that we're going to be collectively working towards. And I think that's really important because, even if institutions sort of want to start to go down a road of true change and transformational work, you need to have a guiding framework. And so I think it really has to start there, and then it has to be carried through with a commitment throughout implementation. And so anyway, there's a lot more I could talk about, but I think it really starts there is with a framework and a will and really authentic leadership.
Great. Thank you, Charlene. Fantastic. Cal.
So one of the reasons I am so honored to be here is that I'm currently a student myself, on a part-time student. I got my undergraduate or my associates in 2020, so I'm working on my bachelor's right now. But so I have personal, experience. I'm going through it right now. But I'm really excited about something that I've only been in my position for a year. So again, that's also another reason I'm honored to be here. But something that we're working on implementing is hiring 3 Indigenous and rural leaders to live in our housing. So they'll live in each building, and just like a resident advisor or our peer academic wellness leaders, they will be compensated by having their room and board paid for, which is a huge benefit. And I've heard that they've tried to hire, tried to promote Indigenous student leaders before it, to be RAs and things like that. But I think maybe one of the reasons that wasn't successful is because maybe that wasn't a position designed for them, right? And that's very much a position that's like about enforcing policies and things like of that nature. That I probably wouldn't really want to be an RA necessarily. But an Indigenous rural leader, that sounds amazing because it's going to be all about supporting their fellow peers, and that would be beneficial because they'll be able to connect with them on a closer level than I can, as a professional staff, and then also to bring Alaska Native cultural programs into their buildings right there, for everyone, and just to indigenize spaces. So I'm really excited for that. To the postings still open now, so just a few more days. So I'm excited to start interviewing and hiring for that and seeing that implementation. But another thing, I definitely have to give a shout out to my collaborators over at Native Student Services. They do some awesome work there, including the NET program, the Native Early Transition, which definitely have seen it's such a huge benefit for students who are, first time in college. They get to join this cohort. And they check in, with Paula from the student services coordinator, and she checks in with them and brings them all together early to move on to campus early, and then they go through how to be successful in college, step by step, answering all their questions and making sure that they have everything that they need. So I think that's a fantastic program, as well as I've heard of the cultural identity program, which unfortunately has been suspended due to the pandemic, because that involves bringing elders in and really, getting students connected to their Alaska Native culture, because there's all sorts of Alaska Native students. There's students that are deeply connected, but there's students that, are rediscovering their identity because it's been lost due to, parents in boarding schools and such, and just being displaced. So, that's a really huge thing to help students reconnect to their identity and celebrate and focus on the strengths and native values. So I'm definitely hoping that's something we can bring back, because that will help with, but as Charlene said, creating that sense of belonging, which is so important. So yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Cal. Justina.
Thank you. So thinking about some things that our organization has implemented that we have saw changes. We have been working with Achieving the Dream, which is a very large national partnership to be a part of. But what's great about it is that they have created a specific tribal cohort that allows our tribal colleges and universities to work together. So we could speak to the population that we serve and could really benefit, because oftentimes we know we don't fit into the larger colleges. So having that opportunity to work with Achieving the Dream, we have implemented a couple things within our institution. One, which is called SMARTS, which stands for Students, Mentoring, Advocating, Referral for Total Success. And research shows that if we stay closely engaged with students at their first year of courses and classes, there's much more positive results with their success and retention. So our student services began a mentoring program where they stay in contact with students who are newly enrolled and really stay connected to them for those things that may fall through the cracks of setting up their email system. Are you checking your emails, getting the AccuPlacers and the technology and the financial aid and all those little pieces that tie to the overall success to get through those unfamiliar hurdles. Also working really closely with faculty for the referrals and priorities to make sure that faculty is working with student services and more of the non-academic supports within the college. And we recently had a meeting and somebody shared the statement, and it really stuck out to me, was student ready versus college ready. And I had to write that down, student ready versus college ready. And that just really ties to how we support our students. And we also have something that we presented at the start of the semester, which is Students First, and it's Iḻisaġvik, so that we, you may see in our Zoom, I have our little sheet that we have, but we wanted it to be a really good reminder for our employees on, think student first in all ways. And we asked our staff and employees and faculty, how do our actions and decisions impact our students? Do they support our student-driven mission? Is staff meeting the students where they are? Do our students have what they need to be successful? So those constant reminders of what we're doing and really honing in to IT, to maintenance, to our mechanics. All of you are important, and you all are, without your supports within our institution, it helps make our students be successful. And one last thing was the unapologetically Iñupiat initiative that we have been going strong for many years now. This was prior to my presidency that we started this unapologetically Iñupiat experience, but sharing it and sharing it with our employees that this is something you must do. We're turning it to say, we're giving you the gift of the experience, the Iñupiat experience. And here are some of the opportunities that can help you be more successful when you're working with your students, when you're working here at Iḻisaġvik. And we're not putting down any other culture or any other race, but if you're electing to work at Iḻisaġvik, or if you're electing to be a student at Iḻisaġvik, you're going to experience an Iñupiat experience. And we're not going to just give you a list of things what you're supposed to do. We're creative with having allies and supporters. So oftentimes we have faculty are not familiar with our community, but allowing those opportunities to have kind of allies. I'm going to go to this community event. I'll meet me at door 5 if you want to join us, so that they don't have to experience that uncomfortably by themselves, but we're being a part, we're sharing our culture and giving that gift. with everyone, and not just our employees, but also our students to share this wonderful gift that we have.
Great, thank you so much, Justina. So as a next step, so we have a lot of different people are watching this from across the nation. And one of the things that happened when I was working with the University of Alaska and the Alaska Native Success Initiative was speaking to one of our student coalition groups, and they said, do you have a checklist? Like, how do we as a student group start to advocate on behalf of this? Or what's the first thing we need to do to help support this effort and this initiative? And I think that it rung very true to me in the sense of there's a lot of people around our nation and in higher ed who really do feel and want to make some changes and make a difference. But what's the first step, or how do they actually do that? How do we take what each of you have talked about today and actually make it into an action item? And so that's the final kind of question here. How do people who are listening to us and taking the time to watch or listen to what is being talked about here, how do they actually implement within their own organization? What is one or two things that are on that checklist that somebody could provide and say, here is how you get started, or here is something you need to make sure that happens at your organization in order to move these efforts forward so that our Indigenous, our Alaska Native students, our Native American students truly start to see student success. So here's the question, and we'll start with Cal, we'll go to Justina, and then we'll come back to Charlene.
Thank you, Pearl. Yeah, we've talked a lot about the Alaska Native Student Success Initiative because it's great, it's fantastic. It got folks from all across the UA system who were Alaska Native staff and faculty in higher education to really figure out what things do we want to see that we know will help our students, staff, and faculty that are Indigenous. And like I love the document. I was honored to be a part of that. But my critique or my worry is, okay, we have this document with great things on it, but then what's the implementation going to look like? You know, like, what does that process look like? You know, is this just getting handed to the deans and chancellors and vice chancellors, and they're going to interpret as they wish, you know, and prioritize as they see fit? Are they going to include the original, you know, people who created the document, the Indigenous staff and faculty? Are we going to be, you know, brought in on the process and sought our expertise? So that's really, I think, key, is to make sure that whatever you're doing at your school, that you're in community with your Native folks there who, you know, it's affecting them, you know, the students, the staff, the parents, the faculty, all of that. But I think, like, just the easiest things to do if you want to immediately start and go, just giving money to your local Native student services, because they're typically always underfunded. They could always use that money to help students, and hiring more faculty that are Indigenous, as you know, Charlene said, so we have that representation, so we have more voices, and same for staff as well, so we have more support to provide to students. So that's what I would say would be the main things.
Thanks, Cal. Justina.
Yeah, so I think some steps that individuals could take is to get to know your Alaska Native American service programs in your area. I challenge you to do the research and look not only within your institution, but around you to see those supports that can help you. Also, I think I would encourage to think about the history and the population that you're working with, and have some of those individuals included at the decision-making table. And if they can't be at the decision-making table, maybe at the pre-strategizing, or just to allow that opportunity to have that Alaska Native insight and voice be heard, to help measure the success with an Indigenous perspective.
Fantastic. Thanks, Justina. Charlene.
So I think at most of our universities across the country, there's a movement towards greater diversity, equity, and inclusion, but still today, it's oftentimes an add-on or an afterthought. And it ends up being siloed in its own unit somewhere within a campus structure. And I think that that's the easy path. And it's a path that often makes things just a little bit better around the edges for our people and our students, but I don't think it's going to be the path that produces the kind of desired outcomes that we're after as a population and as a society. I think the more challenging but impactful path is all of us acknowledging front and center that these systems of higher education that exist are colonial, they're hierarchical, they are often patriarchal, and that those forces that have shaped our institutions have really deep roots that don't like to be disturbed and that are inherently resistant to change. So I think, number one, having that kind of an awareness is really important because it better prepares you for how to be a change agent within those systems. I think for each of us, as we gain our own critical awareness, we begin to understand and see the world differently, that many of the things that we perceive to be the problems or challenges of our students, of our communities, those are just symptoms of much larger root causes. And so I think just having that awareness is important. I think for on an everyday basis, all of us can, whenever we're sitting at any table, whether it's a decision-making table or just a brainstorming table, we can ask ourselves the question, who is missing? There's a lot of research out there that says once you have women of color in more of those spaces, especially decision-making spaces, that's when the table is changing. That's a really good indicator, right? That diversity is happening in an authentic way. And I think also expecting to be uncomfortable, if this was easy work, everybody would be doing it. But I think, taking the time to learn to be a good ally is important. We as Indigenous peoples don't need anyone to speak for us, but we often appreciate allies in the work alongside of us. And then, I would say just be ready to step into this arena of this work, transforming our institutions so that they're more responsive and more relevant for Indigenous students, and all students is a shared responsibility. And it's often more of a lifetime mission than it is a job. So this is the long haul work, but it's an honor to do it. And it's part of our relational responsibility as those who've inherited the systems and the situation and the brilliance and all of it. What we have today, it's our job to make it a little bit better for the future. So that part is an honor to be able to partake in that. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlene. It certainly is a journey, and we hope this is the first step in that journey. We hope we continue to have these important conversations. This is going to kind of close our time out for our session today. I want to, just in a quick wrap up, thank Cal, Justina, Charlene, so very much for your willingness to be a part of this with me, for your insight, for your expertise, for the work that you do every day. I think one of the things that happens so often in this work is there's a lot on each of our shoulders as we traverse. And I do say traverse, it is quite, it's quite a journey. And so thank you, Iñupiat, for this work that each of you are doing. We hope, for those who are listening, we do hope this is just the beginning of this conversation and that there are more opportunities to engage in the future. We intend to provide everybody a list of resources where you can continue to find information around this topic that can help you as you help to transform your organizations. And really, the end goal is that our students, Indigenous, non-Indigenous, this work is good for every student. This work is good for every staff member. This work is good for every faculty. this is good work for organizations. So that's really critical because it is, this isn't just a one and done type of thing. This is going to be something that is a work in progress for forever, really. So with that, we will provide some resources. We hope to check back in at some point to continue the conversation, see if any of these items on your checklist, if any of them have been able to be completed. Do you have follow-up questions? So we will most certainly work to provide some follow-up opportunities. Iñupiat, thank you so very much for joining us. And we look forward to doing this work together. Take care. Bye-bye.